My name is Terrydavidmulligan. This is Tasting Room Radio and the Mulligan Stew podcast and the Terry David Mulligan YouTube channel. My apologies for having to say my name 3 times, Natalie, but that's just,
Well, I'll remember it that way, Terry. It was Terry what?
Natalie Maclean named, I'm going to write it straight off the sheet here, world's best drink journalist at the World Food Wine Awards, also 4 James Beard Foundation Journalism Awards. She's the author of Red, White, and Drunk All Over, and Unquenchable, and Wine Witch on Fire.
There it is.
Up the book to the camera.
Looks well loved.
See,
you marked it up.
I broke one of my rules. I rarely, if ever, underline a book.
Excellent. I love to hear that.
Got in there. Because there were things I wanted to remember.
Okay.
Okay, 3 questions right off the top. How are Cameron, your mom, and you?
We're all well. And people always ask, where did we all net out? Well, I'm here, so I'm still standing. And actually, the reception to the book, Terry, has been amazing. I didn't know what would happen. I was kind of terrified, but it's been overwhelmingly positive. So that has really been reassuring. And I mean, the response too has been touching. We can get into some of the reader letters if you like, but my mother is doing fine. She's in good health, which I'm so happy about. And Cameron, I have to always rename him in my mind because I changed everybody's names, of course, has graduated from Waterloo Engineering and is now working in artificial intelligence. And he says his #1 goal is to put me out of a job. I say, just try, buddy. But anyway, we like to joke about it.
This is quite a journey you've been on. Well, first of all, your life itself is quite a journey, as we all know. You have so many different interests that you tie together when you write, when you make comments, including music. It's interesting, some music quotes in there. Because here's the thing. I'm a film critic with the Critics Association in Los Angeles, and I'm also a music journalist, and I follow acting. I follow actors, directors, producers. When I read a book, when I see a film, when I taste a wine, when I read a work of art of some kind, I owe it to the person who created it to dive in. I'm in the middle of judging the nominees for the Documentary Film Awards for the critics in November. There's over 300 documentaries to watch, and you can't. Just like wine, you can't drink them all.
Much as you'd love to.
Yeah. I'm thinking, if you can tell us the story, the outline of the book, it will also keep people in mind that this is your life. You have to expose it to all of us, your fans, people who sort of know you, some people who follow you every word. They all have to find a way through it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're all on a journey together. And a number of readers who had early responses to the book said, I have to keep reminding myself this wasn't a novel. It wasn't fiction. It was real life, which I love that they said that. So yeah, the book, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. It is the story of how one woman, that'd be me, resurrects her career and life in the glamorous but sexist wine industry. And it started when my husband of 20 years, who was a high-powered CEO, demanded a divorce. And then my year got even worse when an online mob of rivals came for my career. And so, Terry, I had to fight for my self-worth, for my own son, and I also had to rebuild my reputation. Along the way, I also had to question what role I was playing in the wine industry that encourages, I think, women to drink too much with certain marketing messages. I needed to get back to the thing that first drew me to wine, the love of wine, the sensory pleasure, the connection with the land and the vineyards. I got really removed from that and got caught up in the business of wine and producing more and more content. And so I characterize this as a true coming of middle age story about transforming your life and finding love along the way.
Well done. You got that. I needed that in case so that we can then move on to other things.
Sure.
You do have a thing about witches.
I do. I do. You might think from the title, this is a book about an angry woman who has a lot of cats and drinks too much wine, but it's not. Witches really do resonate with me, Terry. And I think it's because their strength comes from within and not from external validation, something I've been fighting all my life to be driven that way. But, my favorite childhood stories were always about witches. So whether it was, The Wizard of Oz, and you had the good witch Glinda and the wicked witch who was never named. But I was entranced by these opposing forces that, of course, eventually I saw in myself. I even love the straight up badass white witch of Narnia. And, she froze Narnia and canceled Christmas. And that was a very satisfying outlet for, a little Miss Goody Two Shoes. But I do realize that some of the stereotypes types of women can be harmful. And we've had this negative image of witches. But now that I've been through life's dumpster fires, I believe a witch is a wise woman who has walked through the flames and come out on on the other side, stronger, wiser, fiercer.
You do make the point, actually. I really liked it at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Um, when you made the comparison, you reminded us and yourself that religion was created by men and witches was created by men for women. It was a way of keeping an imbalance in life. Am I reading too much in that, and does it still exist?
Ah, you're not reading too much into it. Yeah, well, I'm obviously we're both generalizing here, but I was a very strong Catholic growing up, and I have since left the church for a variety of reasons, not due to this one year in my life. Um, but it just, as I step back, because what a good memoir needs to do is make you reflect, because it's the reflections that are of value to the readers. It's not so much what happened to you, it's what you did with it. So I'm reflecting on a lot of things that have shaped my life and that, who and what do I want to be going forward. And one of those key pieces is religion and this fascination with witches. And I saw them as kind of at a high level two opposing forces. And I still think that exists today. And yet they also have so much in common, from the rituals and the candles and the, belief in seasonal cycles. As Catholics, we would celebrate Easter and then Christmas and so on. But that's all there too in a lot of the practices of Wicca, which is, of the witches. And I loved also how they tied into my own Celtic history, because a lot of the first witches, if you will, were the Celtic druids who were women. So I loved how it all wove together. And those were the connections and reflections I was looking for while writing.
You know, Natalie, you well know, even looking back now, that some men would see you as a threat simply because you are positive, you know what you're talking about, you're emphatic in your statements. Uh, Not a lot of apologies, but they are there when necessary, and and stubborn. All those things that I like about you.
Yeah, my mother would agree on stubborn, though she doesn't like it.
Is that you? Am I described you? I mean, for example,
Yeah.
having written a book like this myself on a much smaller level, I came out the end of it, and Meg said, "Well, what are you changed?" And I said, I realized very early on in my career that I was just an ass, and I went back and I apologized to those people who I had affected and cleansed my soul. What effect did this journey have on you?
Mm. Um, well, it made me ask if I was the person that a lot of social media online commentators, which would be a nice term for them, if I was the person they said I was. And I really had to be honest with myself to get any value out of writing the book and for the book to be of any value to anybody else.
Yeah.
You have to be brutally honest. And that's hard when you've grown up really competitive, always wanting to win, really perfectionistic, and always wanting to please people. And it is really hard to take off those defenses and say, no, 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 you're not your awards, you're not whatever. Who are you and who do you want to be? And, the answer to that question, am I who they say I am? The answer is yes, no, and something else. I think when life shoves you up against the wall and forces you to address this, you realize that you're not the best thing you've done, you're not the worst thing you've done. You're everything in between. And that's what being human is. And what this taught me is not just that about myself, but about everyone else. Social media is an endless echo chamber, mindless echo chamber of often falsehoods. But it also is a stark contrast to who we are as humans. We are not the worst thing we've done or the best thing we've done. We're everything in between. It's like saying there's one word that can sum you up or one sentence that can sum you up. You're not. You're a novel. And what this experience did for me was, first of all, get me off my high horse, but also when I got back up again, was to, it forced me to look at other people that way, including the people who attack me, and to realize they're human too, and they're operating under the set of assumptions they have, and they actually might be just doing the best they can.
Well, remind the audience, please, what they were saying about you collectively.
Sure. So the inciting incident, if you will, what set this whole thing off was it's long, tedious, and legally boring, although it can have real implications. But to summarize in a nutshell, the LCBO, our provincial liquor board, publishes reviews of wines every time it launches a new wine. So thousands of reviews come out on its website, in its publications, and so on. My reviews are quoted, other people's reviews are quoted, and so on. So I started noticing that another wine website was quoting my reviews, even though I had declined politely to be part of their website. So I thought, well, this must be okay. This was back in the heyday of aggregators. Rotten Tomatoes, let's, aggregate all these reviews about a movie. Huffington Post. So I thought, well, this would, I should be doing this too. My competitive instinct kicked in. I should be quoting what all the reviews are being posted in the LCBO so people have more context for a wine and so on. So that was the lightning rod, or I became the lightning rod for that practice of quoting others' reviews. And so the accusations were about copyright infringement. Some people got it mixed up with plagiarism, which this wasn't. That's when you try to pass off others' work as your own. These were attributed. And even I dropped out of law school, but I certainly got a legal degree, at least in copyright, by the end of it. I was within the bounds of copyright fair use. It has a bunch of exceptions, criticism, research, education. It's called fair dealing in Canada. Anyway, that's getting down the tedious rabbit hole. But so what they were saying was that I was violating their copyright.
Sure.
And I took down all the reviews, by the way. So
Were you surprised? You were aghast at how hard they came at you?
felt like something that had been pent up for a long time.
Long time.
A long time, years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they just needed that little pinprick in the dam to let it all out. And they did. They really did.
How long did it take for that to heal?
I'm still working on it. So, memoirist Glennon Doyle said, write from a scar, not an open wound. And then my family said, "Why are you writing about this when at least the scars have healed?" And I said, "Well, Sean Doherty, beautiful Irish poet, said, 'Why even bother writing about this? Why now?'" And he said, "Because somewhere, someone out there has a wound in the exact shape of your words." So, in other words, I needed the passage of time to do that healing. The therapy continues. These things always stay with you. They're always part of you. They're part of who you become. But in terms of how long did it take to get over it, the first year was the hardest. I developed a heart murmur. There are real physical implications. I mean, people say it's the internet. Sticks and stones will break my bones. Just turn it off. But if you earn your living online, you can no more just sort of turn it off than a surgeon can walk away from a hospital, at least if you want to earn a living and if people depending on you for that living.
Online bullies
Keyboard cowboys.
in
Yeah.
literally in anonymity, as they always say, sitting in their shorts in their basement sleep.
In
Uh,
their mother's basement, eating Doritos.
I know some of them.
We all
You
do.
know them, yeah. Um, they can do anything they want in this day.
There's no accountability.
No accountability. But you do want to surround yourself with people who are accountable and who do understand, and you can have a dialogue with. Do you have those people in your life now? Do you feel comfortable?
I do. I mean, I was always a loner and an outsider, not just because I was an only child, but because my mother, who was a school teacher, and I moved probably 10 times before I turned 14. And so I was always in a new town, in a new school. So I developed the keys or the skills of an outsider, which of course has its pros and cons, makes you very observant, helps me with my writing, very lousy for birthday parties and socializing though. And so I've learned from this experience that you cannot do it alone. I held all of this in, what was happening online, for a week before I even told my partner, my mother, and only details at a high level to Cameron, my son, because he was a young teenager. And it wasn't till I let them in that I realized being strong doesn't mean going it alone. It means bringing in the people you love and trust.
And when did the balance between men and women in the wine business? You'd always known that women have to work 3 times as hard as guys to get half the profile. You know that. It's just nature. There's a lot of never mind. Um, and at some point, did that seem too large a hill to climb to reclaim your femininity, your status, your right from wrong?
Yeah, I talked to a few friends saying, should I just walk away from it? This is just so hard. But they said, look at all you've built. You've developed a career. I used to say to them, I'm a nobody from nowhere who built a career out of nothing. I knew no one in the media. I had zero wine knowledge when I started. Now I got training, got a sommelier certificate and so on, and learned, of course, with all the research and writing over 20 years. But they said, why are you going to walk away from that? I mean, recall what brought you to this in the first place, those sensual pleasures, the way wine engaged you on every level, from intellectual to the sensual to even the pure buzz of it, the alcohol. Nothing else has done this for you. Why would you give that up? It's a long road back, but don't forget where you started and why you first came into this industry.
Natalie Maclean, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much, a memoir, and the longest title of the year.
Yes, brought to you by all the Dismal Ds. My marketing team at the publisher said, if you add one more Dismal D, we cannot sell this book. I want to ask, I don't know, depression, delirium, destitution. It's like, what are you doing to us?
Did you think you knew your audience? And if you didn't, what surprises came at you?
You mean my audience of readers?
Yes. And your podcast and just people who follow your words. Um, this must have come as a shocking surprise to them in this conversation. What feedback did you get?
Well, yeah, it was a bit off-brand, shall we say. So, my first two books were published by Penguin Random House, and my agent and I went back to them, and they didn't know what to do with it. So we went with a more risk-taking publisher who was excellent. Um, but my audience, my readers, it was like I've always had a pretty sunny disposition. I've dealt with lifestyle topics, which wines pair best with your Easter chocolate, whatever. Because I don't want to demystify wine. I want to keep the magic intact, but I want to open the door to more people to the pleasures of wine. And I do believe also that the more you appreciate wine, it's just my personal opinion, the less likely you are to abuse it. So that remained my goal. So when my audience, when my readers saw this book coming, and like even the title alone, Wine Witch on Fire, it's like, what? what more than right turn did you just take? But they stayed, for the most part, they stayed with me. You'll always lose some people who are not on your journey with you, and that's fine. You say goodbye. But what happened is that a lot of people stayed with me, but the circle widened so much, and the reviews that I've had from teetotalers or people who don't drink wine at all have sometimes meant the most to me. But the reactions, like I'll share one with you, Terry, that just gave me the, well, I'll just read it. She said, "Hi, this is John." I've changed names, of course. "Hi, this is John's wife. I wanted to let you know that our son took his own life during COVID. He was 21 years old. John started hitting the bottle pretty hard. He's since backed off, and I firmly believe that your book was a big part of that."
Wow.
So no other book that I've written or piece that I've written has any import like that. It's like, that's worth it. That's worth the price alone
It's well
for
beyond
me.
wine. Well beyond wine.
Yeah.
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 How much drinking were you doing? How much spitting were you doing, and how much drinking were you doing?
Too much drinking, not enough spitting. So I've always made this weird differentiation between professional wine and personal wine. Professional is what you and I taste and we spit, or else we'd be sloshed at 10 in the morning after 10 Cabernets,
Exactly that.
right? And drinking too much was never a problem for me in the first 14 years that I wrote about wine until I got to this no good, terrible, very bad vintage, personally and professionally. I lived in an enophile's paradise. Wine surrounds me still. It's fills the gaps in bottles, fill the gaps in my bookshelf. Bottles sit on my desk. 3,000 bottles are under my feet in the basement.
Right.
Easy access.
Yeah.
I used it as a crutch. It was so easy to do. And so gradually, my personal glass of wine, the hour that I started having my first glass of wine crept up earlier and earlier to like 4 p.m. No one noticed. I had the perfect cover professionally. If you saw a glass of wine in my hand at an unusual time of day, oh, no, she's writing something or working on something, but I knew the difference. And wine, dulled the roar of all my anxiety about the divorce and the online mobbing, but it didn't quiet the whimper that was still inside me.
Well, I don't know why I wrote these questions. I'm just following your lead. Um,
Thank you.
did I read something last night about you suggest an epitaph for your tombstone. What was that line?
If I can remember it off by heart, it was something like, on my tombstone it would say, "Here lies Natalie Maclean, 387 million air miles." You get air miles from purchasing wine. Um, Too bad she expired before they did. But bump. It was always that flip kind of sense of humor. I used
But
my own over drinking
you
habits
were
as a
engra-
source of humor.
you do you were gravest.
Yes, stiff humor, grave humor.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I mentioned healing and all of this because I identify with that very much. So we'll talk about wine in just a second.
Okay.
Um, uh, do you feel healed? Does that scar closed?
hmm Think about a scar. It's not just metaphorical, but in real life too, is that the scar, scar tissue is tougher than the original skin that was there before it. It's less permeable. It's stronger. Now, that said, people have said, asked me, have you developed a tougher skin? Which is a different question to me. And it's like the writer Philip Roth said, no, over the years, my skin has become thinner and thinner until you could hold me up to the light and see right through me. And I never want to develop a tough skin. I do believe that the only defense is complete vulnerability. And plus, I want the love to still be able to come in. I don't want to have a tough skin that prevents that.
I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions just because we want to cover a lot of ground. Uh, we both knew the Hardy Winery in PEI in Prince Edward County, and I liked the man. We visited
Me
his.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah. Personal
and
favorite, his wine. I interviewed him on YouTube.
yeah,
Yeah, fascinating.
you reviewed his wines and appreciated them as much as I did. I just thought it was fantastic. And then he was accused of sexual harassment, and the reaction is what surprised you, is it not? Or the inaction?
In action. Now, I believe everyone deserves a fair hearing. You know, if I've learned anything, it's not to jump on the mob pile. But he published a letter on his website, and this is only after the Globe and Mail contacted him twice.
Yeah.
At the first time, because they did an investigation, and 21 women came forward with accusations, and he denied it. And then the second time, just before they were going to print, he published a letter on his website because anyway, I never pretend to read people's minds or intentions. He published a letter on his website saying that many of the allegations were true. So, given that, um, I guess I was really surprised that not much happened. I mean, the LCBO and the SAQ in Quebec removed his wines from their store shelves. And then I'm not exactly sure if the SAQ has relisted him, but the LCBO did 6 months after, just in time for the holiday buying season.
Yes.
We vote with our dollars. And, you know, it's not my place to right every social wrong, but I believe in that old biblical thing, bloom where you planted. So deal with the things that you know about that are local to you that you can have impact on. And I informed the readers of my e-newsletter, my podcast listeners, and so on, that I was removing his wines from my website.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I still wouldn't rate them highly, but I decided to remove them and not to review his wines anymore in light of that. I just didn't want to be part of the economic model that supported that kind of workplace.
Speaking of holiday gifts, would would this be a cheerful read at Christmas time? Because there's humor in it. There's lots of fun.
Oh, there's lots of fun. Just because it deals with serious issues doesn't mean there's can't be humor. I believe the two go hand in hand. In fact, humor is actually seeing the absurdity of some things that happen. They say comedy is pain plus time. So there's lots of humor in here. Yes, it's a charming holiday. It actually, as you know now, Terry, haven't read it, it opens just before Christmas.
Yes.
And then it ends a year later before Christmas.
Yes.
So there's definitely a holiday
Time for the
theme
holidays.
threaded.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, my nightmare before Christmas.
All right. Let me
So,
move over here quickly. Uh, how wine is marketed to women. I know it's a big subject.
yeah.
Your thoughts on that in a couple of secs.
Sure. So, according to some marketing or some wine labels, we're either babes or battle axes. The message is right on the label. And I think that wine labels that profit from powerlessness, we need to vote them out with our dollars. You could say, oh, it's just LOL, you know, social memes, lighten up. But there's so many more wines with authentic stories made by women and other underrepresented groups that I just don't think we need to waste our money or time on them.
Thank you. By the way, just let's bring this right full circle, because the British Columbia wine industry, who awarded you your award in March, I believe, of this year, um, they're going through two deep freezes that decimated many of the vineyards.
Mm.
They've been given permission by the government to go and source wine fruit from elsewhere. And Washington is the first choice, of course, much of the same soil, same conditions. And they're down there now actually growing their fruit for this harvest. I don't know how it's all going to work out. What do you think of the thoughts about that and the transparency of the label saying this is a BC wine as grown in Washington?
Oh, that's a sticky wicket. What else are they going to do? They have to get grapes from somewhere else. I would think Washington would share a lot of climatic conditions,
And they
though,
have the
of
fruit.
course, not exactly the same. I think that it needs to be all of this is about transparency, vulnerability, openness. As long as people know, I don't know what the final label design will be. Perhaps that's what it is, what you just said, but something that says, this is a recovery wine. Help us get back on our feet. We don't have the grapes. What are we going to do? Let the presses lie still, fire all these people? It seems to me to be a reasonable thing to do as long as the labels are transparent.
Also, the other thing is that certain varietals really got hurt hard. Syrah for one, Merlot for another.
Mhm.
Riesling did well.
Hmm.
Franc did well.
Um,
So there's going to be big changes out west.
it's an opportunity, if you will, for rethinking and replanting, just as phylloxera was in the late 1800s for European vineyards. That that root louse just devastated their vineyards. So there is regrowth and renewal in this industry in many ways, and I guess that's one of the upsides for this.
What's in the fridge? What if I came to your place? When I opened up that fridge, what would be in there? Guaranteed. What variety?
Always rosé. So Ontario, BC, Tavel, France, Rhone Valley,
Oh, way to go.
rosé all the way. And dry, full-bodied, no wimpy stuff. But I just love it. I find it has all of the taste of a great red wine, but none of the heavy alcohol, oak and alcohol or tannin. Let's just shortcut this.
Um, are you driven by the color?
No, I don't care about the color because I've written about the wines or the rosés from Provence, which are beautiful, but they can creep up on you. They call them pink pain because they can look the palest of pale salmon, ballet, slipper, whatever. But man, they can pack a punch sometimes with their alcohol level.
And Tavel is just an astonishing
It's
religion.
Yeah, it can be full-bodied as well, but I just love the full taste of it without going all the way into a red. I mean, if I'm just picking, I love the whole diversity of wine and a range, but yeah, if I have a go-to, it'd be rosé.
In the last couple of minutes I have here, who are you keeping an eye on? What region?
Uh, you know, continue to try to dig deeper into Canadian regions. It was wonderful, even though the tone wasn't upbeat, to be in BC earlier March, as you mentioned. Um, I love to explore our own backyard. I just did a podcast episode on Unreserved Wine Talk on southwestern Ontario, which often gets shadowed by Niagara. I've had Nova Scotia winemakers on there. Um, there's just so much changing and emerging. I continue to write about all wines, but I love digging deeper into what's our own.
Yes, you're right. The Gaspereau Valley, outside of Halifax, they're doing wonderful things and making do with what the land will give them, terroir.
Exactly.
And I'm in the Cowichan Valley, and we have two of our bigger wineries have been bought up by um, Jackson family, and we are seeing new plantings, new punch, new plane loads of experts coming in and flying around and picking up soil and saying, "Yep, okay, we're going to grow this." This is
Yeah,
changing
it's
here.
exciting.
It's the
The
Cowichan.
investment. Yeah.
They used to the Malahat band called it Warm Land. That's what we
Huh.
are, warm land. That we don't have to deal with the lows and the highs, frankly, of the rest of the province. It's quite remarkable,
Hmm.
as is this book. as
Thank you,
his
Terry.
book. What's the website? How can people? You have great connections.
Sure. So if you just go to winewitchonfire.com, that's going to redirect you to my website, nataliemaclean.com. But winewitchonfire.com is probably easier to spell. I've got lots of bonuses there for those who do buy the book. I'll send you personally signed book plates. There's online tastings that are part of the book. And there's even a book club reader guide that you can use if you have a book club, a wine group, or even just, partners often read the book together because it explores issues of how do you feel about your relationship with alcohol or the way wine is marketed to men versus women. There's lots of food for discussion or thirst, whatever, drink for discussion.
Let's make a small pact before we
Okay.
get a run over come Christmas time.
Yes.
I'd like to come back to you and have your end of the year suggestions.
Yes, please. I would love to reconnect with you, Terry. That I love this conversation. I cannot believe how fast it went. Wow. You're great questions. Thank you so much for making me think about things again.
I have to find more time for words. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Cheers.
Okay.